it's Nicholas with the Backyard TARDIS, here with another Red 5 Network Roundup, this time for August. We're never getting caught up. So I did some things. This message is me from the future. I've already recorded the podcast. Me from the future, much like Danny from Comic and Cosmetics says, from the future. But, hey, Backyard TARDIS, timey-wimey is to be expected. So with this one, I took a different approach. This is the longest one I've ever done. I might even have to break it up into two, seeing however YouTube allows me to do this, but I recorded them all in individual segments. I did this for a couple of reasons. One, because there was so much to talk about from so many different individuals, I didn't want to run out of voice or wait until I had time to do the whole segment. Two, doing it this way is going to make it easier for me to edit in a little intro for each of the podcasts, and then it's also going to allow me to basically put them out on my kind of highlights channel. Yes, that's right. I have a highlights channel that I made, used for about 2.5, 3 months, and then forgot about, just because I didn't have time to listen to myself and cut up the video. So this way it's cut up and then I'm putting it together. So that means they're already going to be ready to go through there. And now that I have like channel community abilities, I will probably post links to some of those when the highlights come out. Those help for like certain podcast makers. I know you don't have time always to listen to me ramble about everybody else's podcast, but then you can see and share out what I talk about your specific podcast. Let me know what you think of this format. Is it too distracting, me constantly changing, different haircut, sometimes coat, no coat, day, night? Let me know if like that's just too weird for you. And also, lots of changes on the channel, trying out some different things, been doing some reactions. I want to announce that I'm working on a new series, but I want to have a number of videos in the bag and edited. This is my most edited video I'm doing right now to date. What I consider editing is pretty bare bones and still looks hokey, but these are going to be what I'm going to call the My Fandom series, and this is going to be little 15 to 30 minute videos that are basically going to take, the one I've already done is on Sonic the Hedgehog. Like, why do I like Sonic the Hedgehog? What is my personal story with the brand? I plan on doing Star Wars, Doctor Who, Stargate, just to name a few. Batman. Realized that I got to do Batman after Kevin Conroy. That whole situation got me thinking, yeah, I got to go into that. But just all sorts of different things. I'll probably do podcasting as well, like just one, and then I'm going to create a playlist for those. But I'm also going to have, like, I'm going to put those at, like, the beginning of my playlist, and probably have one that'll be, like, my story through locksmithing, too, that I'll put at the beginning of the Adventures of Locksmithing. Also, with the channel, I'm trying to put a short out every day, 8 a.m., Monday through Friday, Pacific Standard Time, and occasionally on the weekend, too, as well, as where I'll probably put the more fun ones, but I'm trying to keep the Adventures in Locksmithing ones there during the week. And been seeing a lot of channel growth, and been using the community tab a little bit, but I want to encourage everyone, please interact with that, because that's where I'm asking questions to try to figure out, should like I break Adventures in Locksmithing off as its own channel, because I think I have a lot of people that subscribe to me just for that, and they're not interested in the rest of the stuff. And I also wonder if some of the people who just want to hear me nerd talk could care less about the locksmith. I think more of them are interested in the locksmith funny stories, but I think there's also a big part of the locksmith stories that aren't interested in hearing about Star Wars or Sonic or Doctor Who or something. So let me know. Feedback, welcome. So with that, let's get into it.
This station is now the ultimate power in the universe.
Okay, so let's start it off with Scarif the Scuttlebutt podcast. In the month of August, saw some really great ones for Scarif. You guys talked about the legacy of the bad guy, and I really enjoyed this. One of the things that I've always said is that a lot of times it's the bad guy that makes or breaks a good story. If you don't have a good bad guy, it doesn't matter how cool the hero looks, the overall story won't be good. And that's one of the things that I'm not a fan of the prequels or the sequels. I'm an OT guy. But one thing I will give the prequels over the sequels is they had cool bad guys. Darth Sidious, Maul, Count Dooku, General Grievous. Like, these guys, hands down, way better than Hux, shirtless Kylo Ren. Just... And that to me, but see, that's the thing about somebody like Vader. Like, Vader walks onto the scene and it just instantly you're grabbed by him. I feel like he hasn't been done proper necessarily in movies yet, but Doctor Doom is another one that is just like that. He's just has such a presence as a character in his design. And, obviously there's a lot of different villains in different movies, different styles. I think somebody like Biff Tannen. Biff Tannen just represents the school bully so perfectly, so well. Even if we were the jock, even if you were that, like, everybody has been bullied at some point, and Biff Tannen just like totally represents the school bully. A perfect villain for Marty McFly. Like, they have all this other big like thing going on. And they don't need a mustache twirling villain. They just need Biff Tannen. There's so many good ones. Of course, ones like the Joker and stuff like that are always going to be good. I think the Riddler is another one that when you talk about Batman, like, just that obsessive compulsiveness to want to outsmart Batman. With a Riddler, where he could commit perfect crimes, but instead he's leaving clues to get caught because he's that arrogant in how smart he is. Characters like that, when done right, like, ooh, they're so good. Star Trek, like, you have the Wrath of Khan, you have Khan. That was like a fluke. And ever since then, I feel like Star Trek has tried to chase that with the movies. They're always trying to make the next Khan. Most of the time unsuccessfully, though I do think General Kang in Star Trek 6 was pretty close. Doing the poetry in Klingon. Oh, that was perfect. Good villains. But, the bad guys leave an imprint. And we don't want the bad guys to win, but we want to see them, like, just wreck it. Like, everybody wants to see Vader go to town. At the end, yes, you want the good guys to win, but that doesn't mean you don't want to see Vader tear through some rebels on the way. So that's just legacy of the bad guys. They truly make or break a franchise. If you don't really care about the bad guys, in the end, you really don't care about the franchise. Jocasta Nu. What is she keeping in the Jedi Temple Archives vault? Well, I thought about this and I was trying to think of what was the funniest thing to say, and I gotta say, it's our favorite Jedi Temple archivist Rob's personal diaries. They are some of the most sensitive things that have to be kept in the vault. Only the masters of the masters can withstand the spiciness of those diaries. So it's got to be that. It's got to be Rob's diaries. Those are the texts that young Padawans like Anakin should not be exposed to. Then you ask the thing, could Star Wars survive without the Skywalkers? And I'm going to say yes and no. Obviously, stories necessarily about the Skywalkers is not needed. However, I think when you were asking this question, you were more talking about tied to the Skywalkers and their timeline, meaning that something like Mandalorian is tied to the Skywalkers because Luke appeared in it, but also, this is that time period of right after Return of the Jedi, and you got Baby Yoda, which ties back to Yoda, Grogu, or whatever. So this all kind of accumulates this question, like, do they have to keep circling this well? And I find this interesting because, well, I do think that some people would like any Star Wars. I know there's a lot of fans of the Old Republic. I had a hard time with the Old Republic. One of the reasons was it never felt... Oh, lights acting up. Okay. There, that should be better. The Old Republic never really did it for me because it just didn't feel Star Wars enough to me. And here's the thing. I want to see my AT-ATs. I want to see my AT-STs. I want to see Snowpeaters and X-Wings and TIE Fighters and Star Destroyers. And I want to see Stormtroopers. And that's just... To me, so much of that is Star Wars. Now, we had the prequels. And when the prequels came out and they had pod racing, suddenly pod racing became part of that. But there was enough in the prequels, in episode 1, to tie me. We had astromechs and different things that tied me to the OT. That pulled me in and out of these ships. So I'm not saying I don't want to ever see anything new, but there's a certain thing of, I like the Empire versus the Rebellion. And they constantly go to a different time period. It's called Star Wars, so you gotta have wars. So that gets me, is that, if it's a completely devoid thing, I sometimes have a hard time getting into the interest of it. That's not to say it's impossible, but I want to see TIE Fighters. And so if you go back a few hundred years, then suddenly there aren't some TIE Fighters. That's just me, but I'm really tied to that stuff. That is the stuff that I am nostalgic for. And when you go away from that, it's just not as big for me. So, could it survive without the Skywalkers? Probably. But will it have the same impact if it leaves this era? And I don't think it will. Now, that to say, they probably should go to a period of time when people aren't as concerned. But I think that they should do cartoons in this time period. I think they should continue to flesh this out through like the Disney Plus shows and the cartoons and stuff, but make them good. Don't half do something. If you don't have the budget for it, if you don't, then don't do it. Make a really good show, even if it's only one show a year, like Mandalorian or something. Make it good quality, and let that be why people subscribe to your service. Okay. Alright, on Scarif, they also did top 10 things they hate about Star Wars. So, I figured I'd just jot down 10 here real quick, and this will probably be split out into my own top 10 thing, but it's 10 things that Backyard TARDIS hates about Star Wars. Number 10, canon retconning. This is very frustrating. Great effort was put with how loose and fast the Star Wars expanded universe became. Great effort was made to continually make sure and ground over any rough edges of canon retconning. And eventually we kind of had a cohesive, this is what it is. However, I understood Disney was going to tell a big story media. They weren't going to directly adapt a book. And they wanted to kind of start from fresh. They didn't want to have to work inside this very cramped space that they've given themselves with this expanding network. So they got rid of that and said that is legacy. Now, or legends. Now, in my opinion, if they were going to call it legends, that those characters should still exist in Star Wars. Some of the basic plot points should somewhat happen, kind of like they did in those books, so that, yeah, they were legends. Maybe it happened that way, maybe it didn't, and that's just hyperbole how the story's been told, but some version of these things have happened. They're just legends. But when you have Han and Leia only having one kid instead of three, and his name is Ben, it's not the names of the previous kids, all of a sudden, it throws all that out the window. Like, none of those books can even remotely be possible. But here's the thing. Even that, I would have been okay with, and I would have understood from a corporate level why they did it, even though I'm not happy with what we got instead. I would have still understood, but we have comics being retconned by cartoons, comics are retconning books, cartoons are retconning books, and then live action TV shows are retconning cartoons, and it's just constantly establishing new canon from the story group and constantly retconning it. Canon is a joke at this point, because it just seems like whenever they got a better idea, they just retcon something. So now nothing stays permanent canon. It's always based on what's the latest. Now, had it been a clear cut, they formed this story group and it would all stay. And then you have books that retcon the movies. That's right. There are books that change things about the movies. So, and we're told to treat that like canon. That's mind-boggling. That we're constantly, and it wouldn't be so mind-boggling if there wasn't a whole team of people whose job it is to make sure that doesn't happen. I mean, we got movies that practically retcon the last movie. It's crazy. It's crazy. Okay, so that was number 10. Number 9, the Boba Fett mod squad. This really upset me. This is, there were a number of things that I didn't care for in the Book of Boba Fett, but there were moments in it that I enjoyed. But the mod squad has got to be the worst. One, their vehicles do not fit in with the motif of Tatooine, because you're on a sandy planet and they are just like so shiny. I don't mind that they're colorful. I mind that they're shiny, that they have no dust, scratches, and wears and tears. They don't look like they have any muscle, and yet they're supposed to be Boba Fett's muscle. They just didn't do anything cool, and their shiny mopeds move so slow, so slow. I mean, I could just see somebody animating the gag of like just everybody walking past them. All these like slow things, like a turtle passing them, different, because they were going so slow. They looked like they were on a scooter. And it just, to me, it just felt like they were supposed to speed that footage up. And then like they ran out of time and never did it. Was it supposed to be like this high speed chase? And it's like, they're just like casually cruising through the town. They took down Black Chrysanthemum. That really weakened his character. For all the building up they did of him, the fact that the mods took him down did not build the mods up. It took Black Chrysanthemum down a peg. And then the finale. The finale was like teetering on the edge of, man, the last 2 episodes were really good. Maybe the finale, we got riding of Rancors and all this stuff. And then the mods are there, and they they're helping it just teeter down to where I don't like the ending. Yeah, I just don't like me some mods. Um, it's funny because I put that on here, and then I put for my number 8, slow speed chase. Which at first I look at my note and I thought I just talked about that, but no, I am talking about the one in The Last Jedi. The idea that, okay, I'm someone who can actually get past some of the stuff with Luke. Not everything, but some of the stuff with Luke. I feel it wasn't justified on how that, they didn't earn showing Luke like that. But the other stuff, that the concept of like this slow speed chase, of where the First Order is just like following them, taking pot shots at them, but they're slow speed chasing like, like footage of the O.J. Simpson chase. It's just like, no, we don't want to cause a scene, so we're just gonna follow them until they run out of gas. People are able to leap away and come back, but they've not caught up with, like, just thinking about how that works upsets me. Okay, number 7. This one's gonna be toxic fans. And this is not talking about people who hate Star Wars or people who. This is talking about both sides. There are people who are just extreme. They can't take opinions. And usually these are the people that are quick to label other people as toxic fans. And this is on both sides. There are people who will bully an actor, who are of the camp that you need to be loving everything Star Wars. But Gina Carano should be fired because she said a tweet that was offensive. That's not positivity. You got the other side of the fandom that is just making fun of everybody who, if you like this movie, you're not a Star Wars fan. And they're sending death threats to actors and doing that. It's just not worth it. Like, I am no bar none, do not hold back when I don't like something. I let people know I'm not into that. I don't like that. But you know what? I am never upset that somebody else likes it. Never upset that somebody else likes it. I am glad that they are part of the fandom. And, I'm not a fan of the sequels, but if I see a young little Rey at a convention or something, a little girl dressed up as Rey, or at Disneyland or something, I'm like, that's cool. That's cool. Yeah, Star Wars. It's just, yeah. And like I said, it's not one side or the other. It's both extremes. Okay, number 6. Anakin kills younglings. Here's the thing. I walked out of the theater at this moment. Why? Because up to this point, Anakin's go to the dark side. Vader, this epic, one of my favorite characters in all of Star Wars. His fall has been all the whiny reasons that somebody is like a whiny teenager. And here's my problem with that. There are tons of people who are whiny teenagers, and, they have to grow up and get over it. And the whole, like, Padme, this, that. When he decides he's got to save Padme, I see, okay, he chose the side of the Emperor. The Emperor's got to ease him into that. You don't go from being the good guy, the savior, and then you think the only way to truly save everyone is to bring order, to bring an end to this war, Go have him kill the head of the Separatists. Totally makes sense. You know, Jedi would arrest him. He's going to kill him. That kind of thing makes sense. But your first order of business is, okay, you've decided that the working for the bad guy is actually how you're going to bring peace and order to the galaxy. First thing I want you to do, go murder some children. Up close and personal. Like, that is worse. I mean, you go, oh, well, he murdered millions of children when he blew up Alderaan. And he just stood by and watched. Well, that was faceless. There is a different thing between doing than hitting a button to launch a missile or shoot a laser than actually sitting there and slicing up kids who are begging you to help them. You know, that is such a turn that I felt was unearned. And it wasn't until the Clone Wars cartoon that, like, they showed some other things, but still, to me, that feels like too big of a first act. Okay, number 5. We're getting here up on my gripes. Number 5 is Raylos. Okay, these are an interesting set of the fandom, and you know, I'm never one to tell somebody, you know, not to fan them the way they want to fan them. You know, I'm a Sonic the Hedgehog fandom. I'm used to dealing with the furries and stuff like that. But Rey and Kylo are not a good couple. They're not good for each other. They're not some romantic tale. It's an abusive relationship. And I honestly feel that the Raylos are really distracted by Adam Driver's abs. They want that to be a thing, but no, that should not be a thing. And I think there's a big difference between someone like Luke still seeing good in Vader. Rey doesn't just see good in Kylo. She feels the idea that she would feel romantic affection for him is a very, very different thing. You know, she looked at Han Solo in the brief time she knew him like a father figure, and then she watched this man murder him, and in the next movie they're having saucy moments. That just does not work for me. I'm sorry. And the people who are really a strong proponent of this, kind of going back to the toxic fan, like, some of them tend to be the most, like, forceful of their opinion on others. And, you know, if that's what you want in your fan fiction, that's good, but do not expect a big major studio to do that. That should not be something we're pushing. The fact that it feels like J.J. Abrams, like when he did Rise of Skywalker, it was like he had a checklist. Okay, fans are upset about this The Last Jedi, they're upset at this Last Jedi, and it looks like fans are asking for Kylo Ren and that to have a relationship, really, and it feels like the kiss and different things they did was like checkbox. He was going, okay, people didn't like this, oh, they weren't a big fan of Rose Tico, so we're going to write her out of most of the movie, but some people feel like she should be there, so she's still going to make an appearance, but briefly, check, you know, it just felt like... and the Raylo stuff felt like that, and that they should not have done that. That should not have been a thing. Okay, number 4. Oh, sticking with the sequel trilogy here. Luke having a Force stroke. Okay. In The Last Jedi, we saw Luke being the hermit, being that. And you know what? I didn't have a problem with that, like a lot of people do. You saw Yoda do that. You saw Obi-Wan do that. But Luke should not accept the call to action. When we finally saw him do the call to action, it's badass. It's like he's like dusting it. But then he just dies of like a Force stroke. That was an unnecessary death. There was nothing in precedent in Star Wars that said that would kill him. Carrie Fisher had died, which meant we knew we would not have her for the next movie. So having more Luke Skywalker could make up for that. It's like they just killed him because they wanted to kill him. I don't. It's lame. It takes something really cool. Finally, like Luke stepping up. We're getting the Luke Skywalker we wanted, and then he strokes. Okay. Return of the Jedi Special Edition. Yes, that is my number 3 most hated thing in Star Wars. When it comes to the original trilogy, like growing up, Return of the Jedi is my favorite. The special editions, New Hope probably lowers it by a star. Empire Strike Back, I would say, is even superior to the original edition as a special edition. But when it comes to Return of the Jedi, it takes it from one of my favorite movies to one of my least liked Star Wars movies. The stuff in the Jabba Palace scene, that was one of the coolest things for me as a kid. Getting all those little action figures, learning all the names of the little aliens in there, and just poring over pictures and books and just watching that scene over and over again. And then to have this CGI fest of what looked like it was meant for a 3D show with the lips coming towards the screen. No, it was so much worse. And then at the end, yup, da 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 da. I love the Ewoks. I love the ending of that thing. And it's like all the other stuff they added to it. You know what? I don't mind seeing the celebrations across the galaxy. Make the movie longer then. But give me my yub nub. Okay? Give me my yub nub. And also, I think it is... You have a classic actor who... One of the only ways he gets credit for being Darth Vader is that Force... Like, it's the mask is revealed, and then you have him there as the Force Ghost. To have that wiped away with Hayden Christensen, like, I had no problem with Hayden Christensen, but you're wiping away this actor from that to put that there, and I just no, that's wrong. That's disrespectful. Number 2 reasons I hate Star Wars. Going back to The Last Jedi, Cantobite. Here's the thing. Cantobite actually seems on paper like it could be a really interesting thing. We're talking about learning about the rich elite. They don't care which power's inside, this. And, they're getting rich off of both sides. They're selling to the good guys and the bad guys. They're making both of their vehicles. And, it's a lot of commentary and stuff like that. But here's the thing. 1, suddenly we devolved to prequel level CGI aliens. Like, it's just a background full of CGI aliens while our actors run across the green screen. 2nd, the entire fate of the Resistance is based on this mission. And they stop to solve a planetary injustice in horse racing. They risk everything, their lives, the entire lives of the Resistance and everything, to free some horses. Did PETA pay to put that? Like, did they sponsor this movie? Here's the thing. In episode 1, Anakin asks Qui-Gon, "Are you here to free the slaves?" And he says, "No. Unfortunately, I have much more important things happening right now than freeing these slaves." There is no way you can tell me that freeing those slaves was less important, less of value than freeing those horses. But it's in context. He is in the middle of a huge mission. Lives are being lost as they speak. A war is about to erupt and go on. And, he just can't get caught up in this right now. And that's sad. And it's not right. And it's an injustice. But that is just not the mission at the moment. And the fact that Cantobite gets derailed, this is why people don't like the Rose Tico character, because this is where she gives the big speech. This is where she leads Finn, who is super impressionable, down this path. Honestly, that's the thing. And then they go through that whole mission, and it proves pointless. And maybe it's pointless because they spend so much time. We don't know, but it's like it. You could cut that entire Cantobite scene out of the movie. It doesn't change the movie at all. It changes nothing about the movie if you remove it. So it adds nothing to the plot, nothing good, and it just really just feels out of place. Okay, my number one reasons I hate Star Wars is whiny teen Vader. Vader is the ultimate villain. We talked about this with your Legacy of the Bad Guys, Scarif. I love me Darth Vader. He's the reason that, fall in love with Star Wars. The moment he walks out in A New Hope, it just... Vader. And then to see him, I was not a whiny teen. I was doing my work, keeping my head down, getting out of school, went into independent studies, did high school in half the time, and joined the workforce because I was just so over whiny teens as a kid myself. I don't relate to Vader at all. Or Anakin, I should say. To see that be the reason why he becomes like this ultimate villain and bad guy in the universe was just such a letdown. It is why Episode 2 will always be my lowest ranked Star Wars movie, because he's such a favorite character of mine. The Clone Wars have done a lot to help improve that, but still, to this day, just whiny, heartbroken, emo Vader, Anakin. I don't like it. I am doing my best not to get upset, because when I start talking about this, I get visibly upset. I had a period of time where I was done with Star Wars. I threw out all my stuff, gave it away, threw it away, all that. It wasn't until Disney bought Star Wars that I kind of finally checked out the Clone Wars and stuff, because I kind of I want to see, because for a certain point, I wrote off Star Wars. People would say I like Star Wars, and I would start telling them why Star Trek is superior. That's just what I did. Okay, now for the secret number 11. Always do this when I do a top 10. I have the number 11 that just didn't make the list for some criteria, reason or not, and that is The World Between Worlds. Why doesn't it make this list? Because I think the story where it happens is awesome, and I'm a sci-fi guy that loves time travel, loves all this alternate dimension stuff, and so this is everything I love. However, it's also my secret number 11 because I don't think any of that stuff should be in Star Wars. That is a can of worms that I think Star Wars should never tackle. There's certain things, I don't like when they get I'm weird about that. I don't like when they get too magical in something like superheroes. For some reason, a kid getting bit by a radioactive spider and being able to swing around the city is totally believable. A guy building a suit that... But the moment when it becomes more hocus pocusy, then suddenly like the believability of that property goes away from me. And I feel the same way with Star Wars. Star Wars is sci-fi fantasy, but the moment when you start getting hard sci-fi concepts like time travel and alternate dimensions and all this thrown into it, suddenly it doesn't feel like Star Wars anymore, and it feels like it just loses some of its mystique. And yeah, World Between Worlds to me breaks Star Wars, and so I don't want to see it come back. As much as people want it to use it to retcon certain movies, I think uh, that is a type of thing that I just don't want to start seeing Star Wars become the Star Wars multiverse. Um, it's just that won't be Star Wars. I don't want to see a Star Wars time heist. I don't want that stuff. Put that in Star Trek. Put that in Doctor Who. But put it even in Stargate. But leave it out of my Star Wars. All right. That's my top 10 things that Backyard TARDIS hates about Star Wars. Let's move on.
Do you like sci-fi, fantasy, action, adventure, and comic books? Then you've come to the right place for your weekly dose of anything and everything geek. So strap in and let's get this show on the road. Welcome to the Science Fictionary Podcast.
Okay, next up is the Science Fictionary, and they talked about a couple of things in the month of August that really got my brain moving. They were discussing the CW Flash, and David was kind of talking about going through and doing the whole Arrowverse. I am down. You want any research notes spread back and forth? Up until recently, I really consumed that huge. And with Flash is one of those things where it started out really strong, and then it kind of went a little weak, and then it got really strong again, and now it's back to being really weak. And I do agree that the more that Iris is in it, the more it wakes. And that's something that all the CW, it's not anything against the actress herself, but these CW shows, when they do like the superhero romance, I think back to like the Adventures of Lois and Clark, like they did that so well. But CW, like from Smallville on, whenever they have the main hero in a romance, but even in Smallville didn't hit this bad, but when you try to have that non-powered female character be part of the hero team, instead of the, oops, I gotta keep my secret from her, it makes it hard. And usually, once that secret's revealed, like that show, that's either its last season or next to last season. That's typically how it was done in previous superhero shows before. But the CW has this thing where, whether it's Felicity in Arrow or Iris and Flash, like they find that out really at the beginning of early on in the show. And then the tacked on relationship of now we have this character, but we don't know how to write them. That is a huge problem that the CW has. Now, the Flash getting set for a new season, why was there a sudden bump in the Flash? Well, I bet a lot of Flash fans were like me. I had kind of fallen off Flash. I had like a half a season sitting on my DVR, and then the new season was coming out, and they announced that it was the last season, and they were throwing trailers out to see how it all ends. And I was like, you know what? I've been through the good, I've been through the bad. I want to see how this ends. Because out of all the CW Arrowverse shows, I did like Arrow, but Arrow fell off very hard and once again came back and then fell off even harder for me. But I really liked Flash. And I just wanted to see how they were going to end the show. So I thought, you know what? I got half a season, binge that, watched this season, got halfway through this season, and then they announced that no, there's going to be another season because this season got such great views. And then I haven't watched the last 2 or 3 episodes of this season, just because that like completely deflated me, because I thought they had like an idea of an ending. So that means they didn't even have a planned ending. They were just looking at like 2020 and they were like, this is probably going to be our last season because all these actors are going to book different people or whatever they were thinking. But it just kind of blows my mind. Now, with that related topic, you talked about what's going on with DC and Warner Media. And man, if, DC has had such trouble planning. Say what you will about the CW stuff. Because it's trash superhero TV. I enjoy it to some extent. Less so recently than I had in the past. Maybe partly because we are getting so much good superhero content in the way of movies out all the time, and now Marvel TV shows and stuff, that the campy CW stuff wears a little thin, and they're going really hard on some things that just has made it less enjoyable. But you gotta admit that they do a lot of planning. They set a lot of things up, and all these crossovers between the different shows. Next to the MCU, this is probably one of the strongest connected universes, just as far as actually doing it, having these shows crossover. Now, that's not to say that they're not messed up. When they like rebooted the whole universe to put like Supergirl in that, they were kind of will they, won't they with Lois and Clark, because those were part of Supergirl's universe, and they said yes, they were going to, and then when the Arrowverse was kind of announced to be done, they said no, it's not, which is kind of weird. And then they had right as they were combining everything, they had Stargirl come out, and they said that was in a different universe. And the same thing with Black Lightning. When he came out, he was in a different universe. Now, it made sense with Supergirl. It started on a different station. Same parent company, but a different station. But when it came to Black Lightning, that didn't make any sense. That was a CW product. Why would they put him in a different universe when they were already having all these crossovers? So there's a little, messing around there where they can't decide whether or not they're ending the Arrowverse or extending the Arrowverse. So they don't know whether or not they want these new shows to be in it. But even that still, like, compared to what's going on over at DC in the movie field, is differently. And you are seeing a lot of DC Warner Media, as they're merging. This is a big thing. Like, when AT&T bought Warner Media, AT&T had no business doing that. They really needed to buy a smaller fish. They needed to buy an MGM. They needed to buy a Sony. They needed to buy, something of a smaller nature. Even like the Hollywood Video, Universal Studios or something. A much smaller property. But when you look at Warner Media, really, that's the second only to, at one point that was bigger than Disney. As far as like the Disney empire, you look at that, you think like the Paramount, CBS, they're pretty big. NBC, Peacock, all that's in that family, with Universal and all that kind of, like, they're big. But AT&T Warner, like when they purchased that was huge, and AT&T didn't know what they're doing. When you look at like Amazon, like, they're buying MGM because MGM is small enough that they can learn how to know the business and how to work and how to expand with those IPs without tanking their company. AT&T is this huge company that was like, what do we do with all this excess money? Well, we'll buy one of the biggest studios in existence that's a complete multimedia platform. And that didn't go well. They didn't know how to run it, and they were making a lot of bad decisions. It makes me think back to, I did a job once as a locksmith. We were we were bidding a job for a hospital that was being constructed, but the actual hospital committee went out and got a general contractor's license, and they were the general contractor, was a committee of doctors. And I remember we had a thing like there was like, it called for like 12-inch bolts to go for mounting into a 6-inch wall. And it took like 3 months for doctors to sit there and look at our thing and saying why we needed it to get them approved. And they made us install the stuff with the one that pokes out the other side, with the one that doesn't, the 6-inch, and hang weights from it to make sure that was adequate. And I just remember the ludicrous, like, you cannot have 12-inch ones sticking out the other side. It's the same partner, it's just shorter. But it took them 3 months to approve it. And that's because they were doctors and they had no business being in charge of a construction site. And that's AT&T is a phone company. They are, the distribution method. They're not content creators. They're not that. And I mean, that's the big dream, of any, if we buy this company, then everybody's going to have to use AT&T and not Comcast, because if they don't use AT&T, they'll lose out on all this stuff. I know that's what they were thinking. Like, part of our service is to deliver this stuff. So if we own the stuff, that's just going to make us more powerful in the industry, make us more monopoly too. But it didn't go well. And they've been messing it up so bad between interference. Another company they bought was Viacom, who was owning all these YouTube channels. And then they put Warner Media in charge of YouTube channels and drove them into the ground. Companies like Screw Attack, like Rooster Teeth, these different companies, all of a sudden having to go, instead of by YouTube rules, having to go by TV rules, and it just destroyed their companies. Now Warner Media is coming in. Now Warner Media, not Warner Media, Discovery is coming in and buying them. First of all, Discovery should have never had the ability to buy a company like Warner Media. That is like Universal Studios, Universal buying Disney. When you think about it, like, that's a company that is this big in thing, buying a company that's like this big in the industry. Like, yeah, they're a big name and they hold a lot. And you think like the Discovery Plus streaming service, in all aspects, was a positive, profitable thing, while HBO Max was not. However, that is because HBO Max was bloated and was costing way too much to make, whereas Discovery Media was like cheap TV. But when you look at the subscriber count, like, they didn't even have 1/10 of the numbers that HBO Max had. So they might have been profitable, but they were working in such a smaller pool. They should have never. That shows you how much AT&T drove Warner Media into the ground. So I imagine when this little company spent probably every ounce of credit they had to buy that Warner Media, and then they saw that, like, oh, this project needs 80 million, this project needs 50 million, this project needs, and they're looking at like all these things. And they realized they bought a company that was probably on the verge of bankruptcy. That if they weren't part of AT&T, that makes this continuous cash flow from all these other avenues, that they would have folded. And now you're this little company that doesn't have those giant sums of cash flow coming in. They have to cancel stuff. They have to cancel all these big projects. And something like Batwoman, you go, well, it's this much. They're looking at, okay, the AT&T Warner, they spent $300 million on this movie, but we're going to have to spend another $50 million plus advertising to possibly get that money back, or we can cancel it and declare the tax write-off of the money we didn't actually spend, but it's considered part of the value of what we bought. Let's do that, because they don't have the money to produce it. Now, they have other things that look like a more sure win, like the Black Adam with The Rock. that might have cost a little bit more or this or that, but that was something that, although The Rock to me has never, historically, like his movies don't show that he himself boosts the movies. He is a big name, he is that, but it's never, you'll notice like a trend, like he's been in some like huge successful movies, but usually he's not the central person, and his movies tend to be hit or miss on whether or not they're big hits or not. So, you just have to look at like something like Jungle Cruise to see that just putting The Rock in it didn't make it an instant hit. But that's what they're doing. Like, they're canceling stuff. Like, they're having to scale back big time because HBO Max spent ludicrous amount of money, and yet they baffled the launch of their. There is no reason why they should not have surpassed Disney Plus right from the get-go. When you look at the back catalog they had, matching Disney, plus all the fact that they had the jump start of HBO was already a huge streaming service, a premier streaming service that people were used to paying more. Like, if they had made the transition seamless, had Roku support, all this stuff, but they didn't. They still had a lot of the DC stuff was over on this DC streaming service, and they didn't have Roku support, Roku, however you say it. They didn't have a smooth, like, if you were an HBO Max or an HBO subscriber, it didn't just like turn into an HBO Max subscription, so that all those numbers would have just automatically transferred over into the streaming. They should have consolidated all that. And there's legal stuff about that, but that's, once again, AT&E not dotting the I's and crossing the T's before they launched it. To now where we're seeing Discovery is taking a lot of these shows, they're taking them off of HBO Max and selling them back to companies like Netflix and different things. Some stuff that they were paying for. Doctor Who is going to Disney because HBO Max not renewing their purchase from the BBC of Doctor Who to be able to have that on their streaming service. Why? Because they don't have the money to buy that stuff. And it's funny, but like HBO Max may go away and it may go back to being HBO, where you're paying for that streaming service just to get the HBO Game of Thrones type stores, where it goes back to just being a service where you pay $15 a month for like 4 shows a year, versus now where all the stuff that they used to get money from places like Netflix and other streaming services like Hulu, Netflix, Prime, all of those were giving them money for each of these individual shows. And now that's coming out of their money they're getting from the subscribers. And they're still producing, for that same amount of money, all the high-end Game of Thrones stuff and Chernobyl and all that kind of stuff. You're going to see, like, they canceled Westworld. Why? Because it costs way too much to make. So I think we're going to see a huge scaling down of Warner Media and then slowly building back up, because Discovery, they've bought like some of the best IPs in the world, and once they get the ball rolling, once they get like some decent Batman movies out there making, the $1 billion mark movie box office, whatever, once they start getting some of this stuff out there, it's gonna bring money in. It's slowly gonna build them up as a company, but they don't have the money AT&T did to basically keep patching and bailing out the sinking ship. So they definitely are going to have to make some changes. I think that this is going to be a good thing. However, I look at it, it's going to work out one of two ways. Either they're going to be successful in scaling back, they're going to make Warner Media a much smaller company that's slowly going to grow back, or in a couple of years, Discovery is going to realize they bit off way more than they could chew, and they're going to sell it to somebody like Amazon or Apple. Because Apple really wants to buy a studio, but they just don't want to spend the money. And Amazon, too, once they've gotten MGM kind of all suited and they figure out what they want to do, Amazon has the money to burn. They could buy such a studio, and if once they have, they've got their own originals, once they've got some MGM stuff under their belt, then, tackling something bigger, they might be ready for that. They might understand the industry, and be ready to pull the trigger on a big purchase like that. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what's going to happen over the next couple of years, because it's going to be one of the biggest, franchise holders is suddenly going to be having to work on a low budget. And I imagine we are going to get a lot of more CW type stuff to try to make the money up. Because, believe it or not, like, a CW costs less to make, and it's probably going to short term earn them more money than trying to make these incredibly huge box offices. It's just like Universal Studios. Like, they're throwing out movies like Jurassic Park that are like huge budget movies, but they're not as big a studio as they used to be. They cannot throw out 5-6 blockbusters a year because it would tank them. But they throw out a couple and hope that they do well, but they throw out just enough that if they're bad, they don't sink their company. And that's where, Discovery Warner is going to be right now. They can't release, 4 superhero movies a year like Marvel is, because if they do and they go bad, it will put the company out of business. But they can release 1 or 2 and then do a lot of cheap projects to keep them safe. But we'll see. You also talked about Cal Kestis, and the actor, he was robbed in Gotham. They didn't make him a proper Joker. I have issues and problems with Gotham. It's a little bit too dark for my take, though I really loved, Alfred, and I loved Commissioner Gordon in that. But I do have to say, you do not get such a caliber of actor as that, and cast him in a video game as a voice actor, and then make that video game character look like the actor that's voicing him. Because a lot of times they don't. They don't make the voice actor and it looks similar. But they did here. And that signals to me that they have plans to show him in live action at some point. And we could see that. Last thing with the science victory. You talked about... I can't even remember what it was, but the character doing the Naruto run. Oh, you were talking about Flash. This is another DC thing of how, he's like doing the Naruto run. And I'm sorry, but the Sonic fan in me has to be this, well, actually, everybody calls it the Naruto run. Sonic was doing that years before Naruto did it. It should be the Sonic run. For all the times now, of course, I'm being silly because Sonic rips off so much stuff from Goku and Dragon Ball. There's so many things. I mean, Silver is basically Trunks. Super Sonic is basically him going Super Saiyan. So much ripped off from Dragon Ball. The Chaos Emeralds are the Dragon Balls. It's very valiant. And the Death Star and the Death Egg are clearly, that's ripping off from Star Wars. However, this is a time when pop culture anime, Naruto is stealing from Sonic. That was his run. He made that cool years before the Naruto manga ever came out, let alone the animated show. So that's just my thing. I always like when people call it the Naruto run. I'm like, that's a Sonic run. Anyways, moving on to the next one.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to War of the Stars, a Star Wars podcast coming to you, as always, from deep within the Outer Rim, far beyond the watchful eyes of the Galactic Empire. My name is Joey Tolley, and joining me, as always, is my co-host, Mr. Garrett Jones.
Okay, next up, War of the Stars. So they had some really good top 10s on theirs. Let's go with the first one, top 10 Star Wars characters. And I just got to say, they put my boy Captain Rex, no, not from the Clone Wars, but the RX-24 from Star Tours. Yeah, the fact that made your guys' list just made my day, because he is definitely on my list. So, because that is how I got into Star Wars. My first ever Star Wars was Star Tours at 3 years old. finding, you know, the the VHSs of like the Ewok movies and going, look, they got Star Tours movies. And I specifically remember seeing like the poster of the Energizer Bunny going to Endor and thinking that that was like, if I went on the ride enough times that I'd get to see that from my little kid brain. And so when I saw the movie, I was like, oh, this is from Star Tours. So that was really cool. And we'll come into that, but here is my top 10 characters in Star Wars. This is very fluid. This is, and of course, you know, when you're talking Legends, when you're talking now with the new Disney stuff, comics, all that, like, it kind of comes and goes in characters. If just OT characters would be a different list than this, but we're going to kind of encompass it all. And, you know, here goes. Number 10, Thrawn. Now, Thrawn, of the EU characters, one of my absolute favorites. I am a big sucker for the guy that plays the 4D chest. And Thrawn, he's playing 560 chess. Like, and he was that way in the original Thrawn books. He was that way when you brought him back in Rebels. He's just all around, and now the new Thrawn books, like, he's just a cool character. And he's blue. I love blue. Blue people, it's so cool. So cool. And just the coldness and his demise in the original Thrawn books, like, so poetic. Okay, number 9. This one is I'm gonna give it a co-place because depending on where you are in the fandom, I feel like these two people represent the same role. But Talon Card from Legends, you know, those Thrawn books, you know, they're kind of controlling the smuggling empire, but he kind of has the same feel as Hondo Tanaka. Now, Hondo Tanaka has gotten a lot more jokey, especially like Rebels and stuff, but this is kind of like him, older senior. He doesn't have the manpower anymore, but like when you look at him when he first comes to the Clone Wars, like he's willing to capture Jedi. He's stone cold. He's running a big, huge smuggler, you know, pirate operation. And that is exactly what Talon Card was doing. And, you know, both of them are kind of like, they're not really for the rebellion. They're not really for the idea of what's going to come next, but they also don't like what's happening under the Empire. And so they're playing their bets like, which side do we want to back? Because no matter what, once government is established, they're going to be outlaws. But who would they rather be in charge? Would they rather be going to, you know, Andor-like Imperial prisons, or, you know, dealing with the New Republic? Okay, number 8, Ahsoka. Now, Ahsoka is one of those few characters that, from the supplementary material, that has just like skyrocketed to a point where she's almost on level with some of the OT characters for me. And she's just a great, well-rounded character. And to be interesting, I wrote this list, you know, back in shortly in August when I was prepping all this, but I'm recording this. It's now November, and we've had Tales of the Jedi. And that might actually bump Ahsoka up on this list, because Ahsoka's just such a great character, and she's had such an amazing arc. I did not like her when she first came out, but she's had such personal growth, such a well-rounded and developed character, and which I know chafes some people the wrong way, because she gets so much development when they want their OT. But the thing is, she has never stopped being in development. So unlike with like Luke or Han or something, if they do anything different, if they kind of do like it chafes people the wrong way. But with Ahsoka, they've been able to continuously add to her character and mold her as their own. And so in that way, I think you know, Dave Filoni is able to make that character authentic. You don't look at the character later and go, well, that's not the character. We've seen the whole journey. Unfortunately, you know, like Luke in The Last Jedi, I think well, nobody wanted to see their hero that way. I think had the story led up to that, people wouldn't be as mad, but they went and took, this is the Luke we know, here's the EU Luke, we're going to cancel that, and then here's where we drop Luke now. And there's no build-up, there's no, it just doesn't seem reasonable, whereas with Ahsoka, you can see changes of where she was when she was a snippy little young Padawan, to seeing when she left the Order, when she joined the Rebellion, and just where she's at in these different stages in life. Number 7, Leia, Princess Leia Organa of Alderaan. Like, what an amazing character. Of course, one of the biggest plot twists in Star Wars, spoilers, she's Luke's sister, Darth Vader's daughter, but just the instant presence she has. Because you think about the scenes like Darth Vader and stuff like that, but the princess, and I think of when she's like talking to Tarkin, and like that scene tells you everything you need to know about Princess Leia. And all this idea that like there weren't powerful women in Star Wars before, well, that's, people look at like, oh, they see the image of her in the bikini or whatever, and they go, she killed Jabba in that scene. Like, she saved herself in a lot of ways. But she was someone who stood her ground, spoke her mind, firecracker, gotta love her. And so my number 6, Obie Wan Kenobi. One, I liked Sir Alec Guinness' performance, even if he didn't like the movie. He did a wonderful job of just kind of being kind of this old mentor, and even in that little bit that we saw him, I fell in love with that character. One of my favorites out of A New Hope. And then when Ewan McGregor started portraying him, it's no secret that I think Episode 2 is the worst Star Wars movie out of all of them. I greatly dislike that movie. However, his performance in that movie is good. I enjoy him in that movie. In fact, I watch, like, when I consume Episode 2, I watch, like, snippets. I go, like, on, it's like I watch Episode 1, if I'm, like, going to do a full watch through, and then I go to YouTube, and I watch, like, clips of certain scenes. I type in the description, watch that scene, and they're pretty much all ones with him in them, because I enjoy him as Obi-Wan. The Kenobi show, I wasn't a big fan, but I liked his acting. He really embodies the character, and, hello there. It just, it works. So I've liked his prequel representation. I've liked his OT. Great character, and of course, expanded universe, lots of good stuff there. Number 5, Mando, aka Din Djarin. This is a character that, like, wouldn't have made my list before I'm like, obviously he didn't exist, but, like, Boba Fett was never going to be on this list. Boba Fett was cool, but he wasn't going to be on this list. However, Din Djarin, Mando, totally, like, just, he is everything we hoped Boba Fett to be. And when we saw Boba Fett in Mando, he was awesome too. But, like, just the whole, I can bring you in cold, I can bring you in warm, or I can bring you in cold. The concept of him doing all that, and then the stuff with him and Grogu, just showing he has that heart of gold and a code of ethics that he lives by. Just a cool character. Really like him. And some people look at him as like a non-entity. I think he is like superb character development. Absolute. One of my top. Number 4. When it comes to like the original trio of Han, Luke, and Leia, my absolute favorite is Han Solo. And that might be a clue to get triggered by some people. Luke Skywalker's not making this list. But Han Solo, after I just dropped that bomb, Han Solo is just, to me, he is what made Star Wars. Like, wanted to be Han Solo. Like, when it came to the Indiana Jones films, I wanted to be Short Round, like the guy that traveled with this cool guy. But when it came to like Star Wars universe, like who would I want to be in the Star Wars? I would not want to be the Jedi with the lightsaber going out and doing all that. But the smuggler, the guy just putting in the 9 to 5 and working against the man and all that kind of, like, Han Solo was just cool in every way. He just oozed coolness. Loved Han Solo, and still do. And so a lot of people are like, oh, everybody identified with Luke. No, I identified with Han Solo. He was always the character that I looked at. And New Hope's my favorite movie, but Han Solo is my favorite character. Luke got better later, but I did not like Luke in A New Hope or Empire Strikes Back. I didn't like him till Jedi. And the EU. The EU did a lot for Luke, in my opinion, in my view of Luke. But Han Solo, by far, the best character. And what they did with him in the sequel trilogy, I had a real problem with that. Of the idea, and this is because of the EU, but he was such an amazing dad. He put his life on the line so many times to save his family. The idea that he would just walk away from his family and go back to smuggling. Is it authentic? Is it true? Like, do people in real life do that kind of thing? Yeah, but that's the point. Star Wars is like a big stage opera. It is a big fantasy. And in fantasy, your heroes are larger than life. And Han Solo was the guy that fell in love, got pulled into the rebellion, and he left that behind him. And so we want to see these good virtues that were in him. Number 3 is that this is a big one for you, because I have always said that a movie is only as good as its villain. Like, the hero can't be shine if the villain isn't good. And Darth Vader is the ultimate villain. When he walks in to a scene, he just steals it. I mean, Rogue One. A lot of people say that's like the best Star Wars, movie ever. And a lot of that has to do with Darth Vader. Right there from the beginning when he steps onto the ship, he's so threatening, so menacing. His dealings with Luke, it elevates the movie so much. Even in that initial movie, when you're dealing with the characters of Obie Wan and Vader fighting, and it's kind of a lackluster battle, the conversation they're having, Darth Vader, the presence just elevates it. Darth Vader is so cool. He is the villain. I mean, none of us want to be Darth Vader, but we still think like he's just so cool. Okay, number 2. This is my favorite of the OT characters. Even beating out Darth Vader, R2-D2. R2-D2, I was obsessed with droids as a kid. And we'll get to that in my number 1. But R2-D2, just his character throughout that, his kind of like sass and talkback, and yet utility, and how like the whole movie is really revolving around him and C-3PO. But I always identified with R2-D2. I had, as a kid, R2-D2 merch everywhere. I had an R2-D2 cooler. I had an R2-D2 boombox. I had all sorts of stuff. R2-D2 everything. By far, my, favorite of the OT characters. I just love him. And he's part of Star Tours. Right there from the get-go. Already fell in love with him right there. And just the idea that, like, he helped fly Luke's ship, and then you get to see him in, like, the prequels, and he gets those jet boosters and stuff like that. Just kind of his attitude, because he's also, you don't look at him and go, okay, well, he's like a droid that has a whole lot of defenses. But he has no fear. And you go, well, it's because he's a droid. But C-3PO has a lot of fear. R2 is fearless. and the idea that like his memory never ggets wiped compared to like other droids, and that's why he's got more personality. I really like that lore around him. He's just so cool and iconic, and I'm a Doctor Who fan, and I like the Daleks, so maybe I have a thing for robots made out of trash cans. But I just gotta love R2. R2D2 is best boy. Okay, number 1, as mentioned earlier, RX-24 Captain Rex. Yes, voiced by the guy from Pee Wee Herman. This droid, like, he just captured me. And my fascination with droids, I think a lot has to do with Star Tours. Like, going on the ride, big part of the thing is the line. Seeing all the droids working in different things. I was also a huge fan of, like, Short Circuit, the Johnny 5, because he reminded me of some of the droids there from Star Tours. R2-D2 was but he's so expressive, he's so fun, and you're so immersive in this, that out of all the rides at Disneyland, like, this totally, like, just took me and enthralled my little mind. And I literally probably would have thought at that age that Star Wars was too slow or too this, because it was little. But it was Star Tours. That, like, no matter what, it had to be good because it was like the Ewok movies, whatever you want to say about them. Like, I watched them over and over because it was Star Tours. And to me, like, that's what got me into this fandom. So he's got to be my best character. And, he's amazing. He's amazing. I just absolutely love him. And I love that, like, in some of the recent stuff, we've seen the RX droids. Now it's a DJ there in Disneyland. He's been in Rebels. He's been in, was he in Bad Batch? But then he's been in some other stuff. I'm trying to remember if it was, I think it was Book of Boba Fett. Like, Book of Boba Fett, didn't like that show overall, but there was like an episode where there was an RX droid, and I remember it being an episode I didn't like, but no matter what, at the end of the episode, I was happy because I saw an RX droid. I love this guy. Love this guy. And hashtag bring back the original Star Tours. Please bring it back. Or make it a VR experience. If it is, let me know, because I haven't invested in VR, but I've kind of been thinking about it. So as always, when I do these lists, I give a secret number 11, and my secret number 11 is Yoda. Yoda is one of those characters that is shrouded in mystery, and while I've never said he was my favorite, and it was interesting in the prequels, it took me the longest time to decide if I thought that was dumb that he was jumping around like that, or if it was the most awesome thing I'd ever seen. In the end, I think I kind of leaned towards the awesome, but most of that came from seeing him in the Clone Wars. Seeing him in the Clone Wars really made me drawn to that character, but he's shrouded in a lot of mystery, and I think that's a big part of what makes him compelling. Is he one of my absolute favorites? No, but at the same time, if you tell me Yoda's going to be something, that automatically gets my interest perked, so that tells you something. When something was a baby Yoda, and I was like, oh my goodness, that's Yoda's species, a baby. Whoa. The amount of hype. Obviously, there's something there with that puppet. Yaddle, when Tales of the Jedi came out and Yaddle was going to be in it, it's just like, all of a sudden, it's like, another, because of how much mystery and excitement has been around this character. So while I don't, he doesn't have the most screen time, he doesn't have the most stuff to draw me to, there is just something about that puppet that really brings you in. Okay, yeah, looks like I'm going to have to split this up into 2 videos for my August roundup because my little phone can't handle processing, editing a 2.5 hour podcast. So look forward to the next one. It's already recorded, so it should be out shortly, and we're going to see some more. All right, have a good day. I'll catch you in the next episode.